Well, hey, howdy, hi, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by to join me today. I really do appreciate it. My name is Ellie, and I'm a witch, and this over here is my teaching assistant, Andy, and today is going to be episode 2 of my Dark Deeds and Demons series, where I talk about Elizabeth Bathory. As I did yesterday with my shot to be included in this series, this is going to be a brain hemorrhage or a zombie shot. Better than yesterday, probably like a 7 out of 10. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this case. Now, I do just want to go through a few trigger warnings before we start. There will be mentions of blood as well as descriptions of torture methods towards the end of the video. I will do another warning before I start detailing any of the torture methods. You are welcome to watch until then, but if that is not something you think that you can handle, totally understand. Feel free to click out and watch another video. I have plenty that are not graphic in the slightest. Elizabeth Bathory was born on August 7th of 1560 in Hungary. Her father was Baron George VI Bathory, and her mother was Baroness Anna Bathory. From what I understand, her mother was from another line of Bathorys. This meant that Elizabeth was both the niece of both the Voivode and the Prince of Transylvania, the Voivode being her uncle through her father, and the Prince being her uncle through her mother. Now, she was raised a Calvinist Protestant and learned Hungarian, German, Latin, and Greek growing up. Given that she was from a noble family, she received an education, and she was privileged to come from wealth and have a prominent social rank. Some people believe that her later cruelty was actually a result of her upbringing and her being educated to carry out torture, though this has never been confirmed. When she was a child, Elizabeth had multiple seizures from what is assumed to have been epilepsy. At the time, that was not a diagnosis, but the symptoms of epilepsy were called falling sickness. The treatment was to rub the blood of a non-sufferer on the lips of the epileptic, or by giving a mixture of a non-sufferer's blood and a piece of skull once the episode had ended. Now, Elizabeth was engaged to Count Ferenc Nadasdy at the age of 11, and they were to be married a few years later. Now, before her marriage, at age 13, it is alleged that Elizabeth gave birth. The child was supposedly fathered by a peasant boy and was given away to a local woman who was a friend of the family. The account is really disputed, though, because the evidence of this pregnancy came up long after Elizabeth's death and was spread through rumors amongst the peasants. Now, the marriage took place on May 8th of 1575, before Elizabeth was even 15. The marriage had been for political gain, as when the marriage was complete, it combined the land ownership of Transylvania and the Kingdom of Hungary. The Count's wedding gift to Elizabeth was a castle in the Little Carpathians. At the time, the castle was actually owned by King Maximilian II, but Ferenc's mother was the stewardess from 1569. He was able to buy the castle in 1609 from Rudolph II, Holy Roman Emperor, which is a little throwback if you know you know. Since Ferenc was constantly away for war campaigns, Elizabeth actually ruled in his absence. The couple initially lived together in Nadasdy's castle, but 3 years into the marriage, he became the chief commander of the Hungarian troops. He had to lead them into war against the Ottomans. This left Elizabeth to manage business affairs and the multiple estates in the meantime. Now, several of these estates were threatened since they were previously attacked, but others were also right on the edge of conflict zones. Elizabeth's first child was born in 1585. In order, her children were Anna, Orsika, Katharina, Andreas, and Paul. There is another unconfirmed child, Miklos, but he was not named in her will, although some sources also say this lost child's name was Gregory, but this child's existence cannot be confirmed. All of her children were raised by governesses, as was common at the time. Ferenc died on January 4th of 1604, though the lead up to his death is not entirely known. He seemed to have debilitating pain in his legs starting in 1601 from unknown causes, but it continued, and by 1603 he was permanently disabled. Now, before his death, he entrusted Elizabeth and their children to Georg Thurso, who actually eventually led the investigation into Elizabeth's crimes. So between 1602 and 1604, the rumors of Elizabeth's crimes had spread through the kingdom, and a Lutheran minister had made a public complaint against her due to it. Now, in 1610, Matthias II assigned Georg to investigate. In March of 1610, Georg then assigned 2 notaries to collect evidence, and by October they had 52 witness statements and had collected more than 300 by 1611. The accusation said that Elizabeth had begun killing daughters of lesser gentry who had been sent to her house to learn court etiquette. The use of needles was commonly mentioned amongst other torture methods carried out by Elizabeth. Some reports were from witnesses who named relatives that were sent to study. Others stated evidence of torture found on the corpses that were buried in graveyards and in unmarked locations. On New Year's Eve of 1610, York arrested Elizabeth and 4 servants who were also named in the witness statements. According to a letter from York to his wife, when he showed up to the castle, he found one dead girl and another prey girl, though there is no evidence that they were asked what had happened to either girl. It is commonly said that Elizabeth had been interrupted from the middle of a torture session, however, she was actually having dinner when she was arrested. Elizabeth had also been arrested before the presence of the 2 victims were discovered, meaning she wasn't caught red-handed like most stories say. It seems that a lot of the events of the night have been dramatized, including the assertion that Elizabeth had been found covered in blood. Now, York debated what would happen next with Paul and 2 of Elizabeth's son-in-laws. The goal was to avoid loss of Bathory land, as it was at risk of royal seizure following a public scandal. All 4 initially agreed to send her to a nunnery, but when the word spread, they had to change that plan to keep her on strict house arrest. The witnesses who testified heard what the other witnesses had said, which in today's standards would have them disqualified from testifying. Servants had confessed during sessions of torture, which in today's standards is not only illegal, but also would have had their confessions thrown out. The servants were executed without officially testifying. Now, the servants had a variety of deaths, including beheading and being burned on a pyre. There are no documents to prove that the accusations were based on anything but rumors. The highest number of assumed victims was 650. The actual trial was split into 2 parts. One took place on January 2nd of 1611, the other on January 7th. The number of 650 never came up during the trial or through any testimony, but rather from a rumor heard by a servant girl that the number had been written in Elizabeth's journal. The journal has never been found, and that particular rumor has never been mentioned in an official capacity. On January 25th of 1611, York wrote a letter to Matthias describing the capture and confinement. Elizabeth was confined to the castle for the rest of her life, where she died at age 54. The letter said that she was locked into a brick room, although other accounts state that she was free to move throughout the castle. On August 20th of 1614, Elizabeth had complained to a guard that her hands were cold, to which the guard replied, "It's nothing, mistress, just go lie down." She was buried in the church graveyard. However, according to some sources, there was so much outrage that an alleged serial killer was buried in their cemetery that her body was supposedly relocated to the Bathory family crypt. Now, the true location of her body is not known, but it is assumed that her original resting place is where she's still located, just without a grave marker. Now, a lot of authors have made the assertion that Elizabeth was simply a victim of a wild conspiracy, arguing that the legal proceedings against her were politically motivated after her husband's death. The idea is that it was politically motivated would make sense given the war going on, but also Matthias had a large debt owed to the Bathorys that was cancelled upon Elizabeth's arrest. The counter-argument is that the religious tension was not really there. The investigation started due to a complaint from a Lutheran minister, and the big conflict at the time was from the Catholics, and Elizabeth was neither. The other argument about this whole case is that it was shown that the body counts were exaggerated several times. As the story has been retold, it has of course changed. The most common story is that Elizabeth would bathe in the blood of virgin girls in order to retain her usefulness like a vampire. The first time the story appeared was in 1729, and that was the first written account of the case. The story, and case in general, were called into question in 1817 when the witness statements were published. The statements included no mentions of any bloodbaths. This idea is just a dramatization of the story, but also probably lies in the treatment of epilepsy that I spoke about earlier. It is likely people just taking that part of the story to the next level. Now, historians don't dispute that she was a serial killer, just the number of victims that she had. The 650 number is false. The real number is somewhere between 30 and 300. The 4 servants arrested with Elizabeth all admitted to her having somewhere between 30 and 50 victims. While this seems like a more likely number, there would have also been incentives to minimize the crimes to minimize the punishment, so that number could be too low. The rumors of Elizabeth being a fan of torture, seeing countless coffins leave the estate, and the claims that bodies with strange and suspicious marks were found have been perpetuated by the hundreds of witnesses. The rumors obviously are not proof, but it seemed that Elizabeth had this reputation long before she was accused publicly. This next part does talk about some of the methods of tortures the servants admitted to witnessing or helping administer, so fair warning if you want to click off now. The 4 servants also arrested were John Govari, Helena Joe, Dorothy Cezentes, and Kate Beniczky. Now, John testified that he was an accomplice to 37 murders. He stated that the girls were beaten until their body was opened up. The victims were also pricked with needles, and heated iron rods burned the girls on the nose and lips. Girls would be dunked naked in a creek during the harsh winters and left outside to freeze to death. Helena testified that she knew of 50 or more victims. Helena corroborated the beating allegations, but added that the girl's skin would be cut with scissors. During the beating, Helena said, "A great volume of blood was spilled around the Countess, so much so that the lady was frequently forced to change her saturated clothes and have the walls and floors of her room washed down." Helena again had the same claims about the freezing torture. She added that in the summer, the girls would be stripped naked, covered in honey, and made to stand outside to let wasps, bees, and bugs bite and sting them. Elizabeth herself would heat keys and coins until they were red hot, and then place them on the skin until the girls had first-degree burns. It was also said that she would use candles to burn the girls' genitals and would stab their vulvas with needles. Dorothy admitted the same torture as the other two, but added that the Countess would use her teeth to tear skin from the victims' bodies. Kate was the final servant arrested, but she was not sentenced to death because the judge felt that she was not a willing participant, but rather an observer. And that is all that I have for you today. A very, very sad case, and one that I really hope that one day we'll have all of the answers for. Obviously, it's a lot of rumors exclusively, which could have been politically motivated, might not have been politically motivated, and that's frustrating that we don't know not only the details, how many victims there are, who all the victims were, but what the cause for the allegations were. Were they real? Were they not real? Elizabeth Bathory also holds the Guinness World Record for the most prolific female serial killer, which I do believe is true. I don't know where I stand on how many victims I believe she had. I would say that 650 is way too many, although reasonably if she was practicing from 1590 to the 1610 when she was arrested and all that went down, then it'd be like one victim every 2 months, which actually is not that much if you think about it, but I still don't believe 650 victims. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, if I missed anything, if I mispronounced any names. There's so many names. I only speak English right now, and obviously she's Hungarian, and so a lot of this was in Hungarian, and they had Hungarian last names or first names, so I hope I didn't mispronounce anything too badly. Please let me know if I did, or if you have anything to add. This was such a fascinating case, and there's so much division in what people believe that it's easy to get on either side of the argument. But yeah, this was episode 2. I thought this one was really interesting to research. I knew a little bit, obviously, the bathing in blood thing, but it was really interesting to learn the rest of the story, the actual story behind everything, and then obviously get all dressed up in costume. Andy's obviously a ghost, a very scary, spooky, scary ghost. And I know that some of you are asking, hey, Ellie, why is your little zombie bite so small? It's almost as if a little tiny skeleton bit me. I'm not making any accusations though, just saying. Anyway, so tomorrow for my next Dark Deeds and Demons, I will be talking about the Vampire of Hanover, but also I do have a misheard history video coming out tomorrow that is going to be the superstitions video, where I just go through some superstitions and, why they exist, what they mean, if they're still commonly practiced. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day though, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!